Good morning, dear participants, and welcome to the second day of the Research and Innovation Days. I hope you had a good and interesting first day. We are starting this morning with a very early morning session dedicated to a specific topic, which is control. It's not a very simple and light topic, but I think the early morning is the good time to start with. My name is Peter Hertwig. I have the pleasure to be the moderator of this session, and I will start by introducing to you the panel that we have today. So next to me is Gaia Fantecchi, who is the head of the Common Audit Service in the Research and Innovation family. Next to her, her deputy, Stamatis Antis, and we have the respective head of sector, Dinos Alevizopoulos, who will afterwards give a presentation. We are also still waiting for one other staff member of Gaia's unit. We hope you will join very soon. So the agenda of this session is rather straightforward. I will soon hand over to Gaia for some introductory remarks. Then we will have a presentation of the current state of discussion on the control strategy for Horizon Europe. And then we will have a questions and answer session. For this questions and answer session, I would ask all of you to use the Q&A part in your screen. So if you look at the top right of your screen, you should see a section Q&A. And please put your questions there. Your questions will then also appear in the published part. And everybody else can vote on your question. So if you think you are also interested in the question of somebody else, vote on it, and then it will appear on top of the list, and we will go through the questions possibly in the order of number of votes. So far from my side on the introduction, and I hand now over to Gaia for her introductory words on the control strategy. Gaia, please.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this RNI Days workshop on the control strategy. Of course, to be subject to control, very few like this. However, now more than ever, European citizens deserve that every single euro of public taxpayers' money which is granted is also spent for the intended purpose in accordance with the legal framework. Luckily, over the years, the simplification in our programs has brought along quite some advantages to the scientific community in terms of decreased administrative burden and also therefore decreased risk of error. However, of course, zero risk does not exist, but this simplification will allow us for the next program to build a solid risk-based control strategy, the guiding principle of which will be better control rather than more control. I will not reveal more, and I will leave the time mostly for the presentation and the Q&A. So I leave you to the presentation by Dinos, and I wish you an excellent workshop. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Gaia. And I think it's now time to start actually the presentation. So Dinos, please bring up your slides and guide us through them.
Yeah, good morning from my side. I will share my screen so that you can see the presentation directly. That will take some time if we remember from yesterday that we tested it. So let's have a go. Or perhaps, since it doesn't seem to flow very well from my side, perhaps we can have it from the participants, from the IT team, because I cannot do it on my screen yet. So here we will need assistance because my computer does not proceed with the sharing of the presentation.
Seems to be slowly working now. We apologize for the delay.
On my side, not yet.
Let me try to share my screen in the meantime, and I put the presentation myself. Maybe this will work out. Please let me know when you're able to see the screen. Can you see my screen?
Oh.
So I see something loading now. Oh no, now it has disappeared again. So maybe Dinos, can you simply start your presentation and try to explain orally, because we will lose too much time otherwise.
Sure. The presentation is based on the control strategy, but in the meantime, I think one of the panelists should try to find a way so that we have at least a presentation from the moment that I have gone through. So we will share with you how we believe that the control strategy for Horizon Europe will go ahead in the future. And for this to happen, we are performing a sort of gathering of thoughts and areas for development of the experience so far that we have gathered from Horizon 2020, because the control is at the very end of the process. And like this, all the experience that we have so far is obviously not from Horizon Europe, but from the experience that we have built from Horizon 2020. And after giving you some feedback and our point of view of the circumstances in Horizon 2020, we will elaborate on the novelties that we bring in Horizon Europe, which is the systems and processes audit and the further cross-reliance on audits. So now, let me give you a little bit of a distinction between what it is ex ante and what it is ex post controls. Ex ante are the controls that we have in place and that we build before the payment. So before you see the payment from the Commission, which is rediverted to you, and it relates to the costs that they have been incurred for the funded action. These are the ex ante controls, and they are before the payment, and the ex post controls are after the payment. So for the ex ante controls, there is an obligation from the financial regulation for all authorizing officers, and these authorizing officers are the persons that they are behind the grant agreement, to set up a system of controls in place to make sure that the subject matter is well framed. The authorizing officers need to establish a set of internal controls which ensures equal treatment. And equal treatment means that the same kind of treatment is given to the beneficiaries, irrespectively of whether they come from the south or from the north, from the east or the west, or the nature of the beneficiaries or the amounts of money associated. The control system needs also to ensure the appropriate balance between trust and control. That means it needs to be cost effective, and it needs to target the considerations of the program objectives. It has to be done in such a way that it is there for the program management and not for other reasons. And the ex ante controls are based on principles. And these principles are the balance between trust and control, which means that the European Commission services are targeting the beneficiaries with trust. That means that we trust the financial statements that you submit to us and the way that you expense. But this trust is based on control. And the two elements go hand by hand. They go well together and they speak to each other. The other principle of ex-ante controls is that the European Commission is building this kind of controls that they are targeting to minimize the burden on the beneficiaries, to keep the burden of the controls into such a level that doesn't dilute the research efforts that you put behind, because at the very end you participate into the actions for the sake of research. And the control should not be there to put barriers on the way that you do research, but to make sure that the amounts of money associated and the efforts employed are done for a good and valid reason. And the principle that it is also fundamental for the ex-ante controls is the principle of equal treatment. That means that all the beneficiaries are treated in an equal and uniform way. These ex-ante controls are based on a methodology which has some limitations, and the major limitation is that it is done in Brussels, it is done remotely, and it is subject to the information that you provide, the financial statements that you bring in, and it is done remotely. That means that there is no visit at your premises or nothing more apart from a review of the financial statements, the use of resources, and the contractual documentation that you submit reflecting the requirements of the grant agreement. Now, the risk-based Horizon Europe control strategy has taken over information from the past, and it is built with respect to the areas for development and the challenges that we have seen. So now we are moving towards a better control. That means we are doing control not for the sake of control, but control that it is built in such a way that it is clever enough and it is better from both sides. It doesn't dilute resources, it doesn't enter that much into unnecessary details, but it is targeted to where it should be, and that it is for both ex-ante and ex-posts. We are reinforcing the circular feedback, and when we say circular feedback, we mean that the two levels of controls, the ex-post and the ex-ante, they speak the same language. That means that and I think now the screen works. So can you confirm that you see the presentation, one of the panelists? Because I see it.
Yes, absolutely. It shows very well now. Yes.
Good. So we are now at the circular feedback, which means that the two levels of controls, the ex-post and the ex-ante, speak the same language, so that we avoid duplications and we are avoiding unnecessary efforts, or we are avoiding over repetition. And it is built in such a way that there is a continuous flow. So the ex-ante reviews finalize and they pass the hand to the ex-post, and vice versa. The ex-post is feeding back the ex-ante for future developments. We are giving more attention to the early detection of emerging risks. That means that we prefer to mitigate the risk at the very beginning of the cycle and not on the very end, because the earlier that you detect a risk, the better that the controls you put in place, and the more effective are the mitigating actions. So the risk-based Horizon Europe control strategy is focused on a way that it is aiming to detect on the earliest stage possible the emerging risks. And last but not least, we are now reinforcing the mechanisms on the fraud prevention and detection. As you already know, we are not in an environment that it is prone to fraud, but these items of fraud and irregularity, they may have a very minor impact in terms of euro amount, but a very, very high reputational risk and damage in case that these things happen. And that's why we are reinforcing and we are reintroducing new mechanisms to make sure that we are raising the correct attention to the fraud prevention and detection. Now, the ex-post. The ex-post, as we said before, is after the payment, after the beneficiaries of the grant agreement have received the money from the European Commission. The ex-post goes hand by hand by the ex-ante. It is a step afterwards. And if we gather back our thoughts from Horizon 2020, we will realize that the ex-post strategy is based and will be based in two major principles: the simplification and the more transparency. And to give you examples of this, more simplification means that when in Horizon 2020 we introduced the flat rate for indirect cost, all the ex post audits didn't challenge the indirect cost of any beneficiary. We simply applied the mathematical formula to make sure that the amounts employed are correct. Or when we introduced the 3 options of the productive hours, all the audit reports that we did and all the ex post reviews were targeting with respect to those 3 options and nothing else. So the audits that we were carrying out were line by line and speaking the same language with the grant agreement. The second fundamental principle is the transparency. And for the first time in Horizon 2020, we were so open, not only to show the way that the grant agreement has been granted, not only to show the annotations of the grant agreement so that all participants can see and read how correctly to report their amounts, but also we went a step further and we, for the first time, published the indicative audit program, which is the way that we are performing in our audits, the way that we are initially reviewing and subsequently understanding and auditing your financial statements. If you Google indicative audit program, it's the first hit that you're going to have, and it is openly wide, easily accessible for everyone, ensuring transparency and equal treatment for all beneficiaries. But one may raise the question, why do we need an audit? Why do we have to pass through the process of the audit, since we are building our strategy and our control environment with respect to trust and control? Simply for 2 reasons, because trust and control go hand by hand. And as we upfront trust the beneficiaries, we build this trust with respect to continuous and multi-annual audits. And secondly, because the audit is a requirement from the financial regulation. There is a legal obligation for the European Commission services and for the granting authorities to feed the authorizing officers with elements of assurance so that they can decide whether the financial statements and the payments that the Commission has done to the beneficiaries are in alignment with the contractual rules, and on the very end to show to the European Union taxpayers whether the money that was spent for a good reason or it was misspent. And if we believe, and if we find through audits that we have errors, that means that we have a paid expenditure that was more than what we should, then we have to alert the budget authorities of the European Union, and we have to raise a reservation. And here on the screen, I have taken out the names, I have taken out the dates, and I have taken out the subject matter, but it is a real example, it's a copy-paste of a reservation that we have raised in the past. And if you remember, for those of you that you have experience from FP7, we were in a very erroneous environment on FP7, and we had issues that we were forced to raise a reservation or our annual activity report and to inform the budgetary authorities that the amount of money that was spent in the past was subject to reservations on our financial statements. And that was the reason that was taking place in the past, and the feedback that the audits were giving to the authorizing officers were necessary for reaching this conclusion that there is a need for a reservation on the financial statements. Now, errors. We spoke about errors that they may trigger the need for a reservation. Why do they occur? Our experience has reached the conclusion that most of the errors are occurring for 2 reasons. The first reason is the misunderstanding of the rules, which means that the rules are overcomplicated. And here our personal point of view is that indeed, despite the efforts and the continued rewriting and continued re-editing and simplifying of the rules, there are still cases that the rules are misunderstood because they are complex or because they are overlapping or because they need further reading and understanding by the participants. The second bullet point says lack of attention to the details of the provisions of the grant agreement, and this is a politically correct way to say that the beneficiaries do not necessarily put all the efforts to understand the rules, even if the rules are simple. If you put those 2 bullet points together, you will realize that there is area for development for both sides, for the European Commission to make sure that the rules are simple, well understood, straightforward, and they touch the subject matter. And the second bullet point is for the beneficiaries that they need to be careful on what they are signing, and they have to read carefully the text, which we are moving towards into its simplification to make it easier for you to understand. But do not forget that you have the responsibility and the obligation to read what you are signing and to make sure that your financial statements are in conjunction and in conformity with the rules. Now, the consequence of an error, because errors still occur. For the beneficiaries, it's obviously a non-optimal use of resources. You have been paid for something that was not equivalent to the amount of money that you have been paid. You have expensed less, or you have expensed amounts that they were not eligible, and therefore the use of resources was not optimal. And that leads to recoveries and to the European Commission and the granting authorities asking you money back. But it also has a consequence for the European Commission, because the more the errors, the higher the scrutiny that we get from the budget authorities, the higher the amounts of audits that the European Court of Auditors is doing on us, the higher the efforts, the higher the administrative burden, and therefore the error is something that we should both work very close together and aim to avoid it. The beneficiaries with the correct applications of the rules, and the European Commission with the setting up of an efficient and effective and clever ex ante and ex post control. The audit cycle is reflecting the audit strategy, which is annual and multi-annual. That means that it is taking place on an annual basis, but it is recurrent and repetitive across the board, and for as long as the payments are taking place in the framework program. And it starts with the planning. And here we are showing you how we perform the audits. In the planning phase, we select beneficiaries that we believe that they should be audited. We will explain to you on the second slide afterwards how we do this selection. But now we are in the phase that we have already selected the beneficiaries and we have started the audit process. The beneficiaries are duly informed by a letter of announcement, which explains the reason for the audit, the subject matter, the amounts, and the actions that we have included in the scope. Before the COVID environment, we were agreeing on the dates that our auditors will be visiting yourselves, and you were providing kindly access to our auditors to review your financial statements and the way that you prepare your accounts. Now, after March 2020, we have stopped visiting you, and we have been starting doing that remotely. And we believe that we can reach the same level of assurance because we have this kind of internal controls for as long as the COVID circumstances occur, to ensure that we can provide correct and reasonable enough audit reports. And therefore, we do the execution from Brussels. We execute the report by reviewing your financial statements, because we are asking you to provide all these electronically, and we open a channel of communication through the Compass system, which allows for the electronic data transmission of files that we review remotely from Brussels. When the situation becomes back to normal, we will start visiting you again in the new reality as it will materialize after the COVID hopefully reaches an end. On the reporting phase, we draft our audit report, which is our first point of view, but we still have not signed it. We give it back to you, and we ask you to comment on it. We ask you to write where you believe that we are wrong, and we ask you to provide additional elements that we have the obligation to review. And when this process is done, then we can hopefully shake hands, and we send back to you a signed audit report, which is the end of the cycle. That this cycle never finishes, because it reflects the annual and multi-annual principle, and then there is another audit and another audit and another audit until the end of the framework program. Now, the error rate that we were explaining before, and the error rate, which is a percentage that reflects the necessity or not to raise a reservation in the annual activity report, is an extraction of the population. So here on the left side, you see the totality of the population. You see all the financial statements and all the beneficiaries that they exist in the framework program. Therefore, you see research organizations, you see the industry, you see universities, you see SMEs, you see beneficiaries from associated countries, you see any kind of segmentation that can take place in the population. Obviously, we cannot audit the totality of the population, and therefore we extract a sample which we believe it is representative enough. Representative in a way that it expresses a true and fair view of the totality of the population. So the second pillar is the sample that we extract, and this sample needs to be audited on its totality. We will have to audit, and we will audit every single year, the totality of the sample that we extract, because this goes to the denominator of our calculation. And in the numerator, we only represent the totality of the negative adjustments. And why only the negative? Because we want to show to the European Union taxpayers the amount of money that was not paid correctly. So we divide in the numerator the negative adjustments with the totality of the sample, and we result into an error rate, which is the one that we officially communicate. The higher the error rate, the more the problems. The lower the error rate, the better for both parties, for the beneficiaries and for the European Union taxpayers and for the granting authorities. Now, I'm not going to go into details, but I will show you in 2 slides where we believe and where we have found the majority of the errors in Horizon 2020. And despite the efforts, despite the simplifications, and despite the new rules on the personnel cost and the productive hours, we have still seen that the very vast majority of the errors still occurs under personnel cost. And to be more precise, they occur into the calculation of the hourly rate. And to be even further more precise, they relate to the selection and the use of the denominator, which is the use of the productive hours. And as we said, we are building the future with respect to the knowledge that we have gathered from the past and with respect to the learnings and the areas for development. And we have seen that despite the simplification for the productive hours, errors still occur, obviously less than before and less than FP7, but there is still area for development there. And this is visual now into our proposal for the way that we propose the personnel cost to be calculated in Horizon Europe. So by learning from the mistakes of the past, we are now proposing a much simpler and a more straightforward way of calculating your personnel cost. The other categories of cost were also erroneous, but not to the extent of the personnel cost. So we indeed have some tiny errors, but not very big, on subcontracting. We also had some errors under other goods and services, which was mainly from the fact that they were not associated to the action, or because they were not properly substantiated, or they were missing the principle of best value for money, and some very tiny errors on travel. But if you want a summary of those 2 slides, in your mind you should have that most of the errors happened under personnel cost, specifically under the hourly rate, and more specifically under the use of the productive hours. And that's what we are aiming to correct and to streamline in Horizon Europe. So the feedback that we got from the exercise, and the feedback that we got was mainly from you, from the beneficiaries, and also from the associations that they represent the beneficiaries, from the participants, from the national contact points, and from those that they express feedback on us. The major feedback that we got is that when an audit is done by ourselves, by the European Commission officials, the result is very good and optimal, and we have reached the conclusion that the beneficiaries welcome the audits that we perform. However, the preparation of an audit, it is time-consuming. There is a repetition of files that needs to be populated. There is a series of Excel tables that they need to be recovered and re-established, and it is a very long process. The certificates on the financial statement, which are of an ex-ante nature, are not necessarily providing the optimal result, and this is because some of the auditors do not possess the specific knowledge behind. And we have also seen that the personnel cost is a time-consuming and a complex exercise, and as we have already seen before, an error-prone exercise. Penultimate point is that we have seen that there are some disproportionate audit efforts with respect to the subject matter. Therefore, the auditors were consuming time on travel and other direct costs, whereas they should be focusing on personnel. And last but not least, we have seen that the ex-ante certificates that we have, the certificate on the large research infrastructure and the certificate on methodology on unit cost, they were too long and they were not efficient at all. So all these are feedback that we have received, and these are elements that we have put together to make sure that our proposal for the next framework program mitigates all these risks and it is clean of all the feedback that we have received. And that's why in Horizon Europe now, which is the future, we are proposing two major novelties. The first novelty is a SPA, and a SPA is not a hammam, but it is a systems and process audit. And we will explain further on what are we aim to do with the systems and process audit. And the second novelty is of a conceptual framework one, and it is the wider cross-reliance between audits. We are bringing to those new elements for the first time. For as long as we have been doing audits on framework programs, we haven't introduced none of those, and we are almost ready for the first and nearly there for the second. And let me elaborate you what we are proposing and what we are bringing into the Horizon Europe. So we are bringing a SPA. A SPA is the systems and process audit, which is different from what we are doing right now. We will, of course, continue to be doing financial audits because we want to see the correctness and the legality and the regularity of expenditure. But over and above, and additionally to the audits that we are carrying out, we are now proposing the systems and processes audit, which are not audit of financial statements anymore, but they are of systemic and processes nature. They aim to provide an holistic view of the entity. They do not go to the level of details of financial statements, but they review all the aspects of the organization. So to give you examples, they review the internal structures, they review the delegated authorities and the authorizing powers that you have set up, irrespectively of your participation to the European actions. It reviews your business model, and it reviews also the way that you have set up your own control for the way that you yourself realize and mitigate the risks that you have anticipated into your business. And therefore, it is an assessment of entities at an overall stage, not only for the level of the European Commission. It is complemented by a test of transactions, which means that after we finish the review of your organization, we will ask you to give us a set of financial statements that they relate to the Horizon Europe actions. And this we will do in order to make sure that if we believe that your system is correct, then any kind of transaction that will pass from the system will also be correct. So imagine an organization which has very good controls in place, an organization that has very nice working environment with business models that they are correct, an internal structure that doesn't generate problems, and a level of mitigation of risks that it is already there with correct controls, then this entity we will get most probably a positive systems and processes audit report. And in order to make sure that this systems and processes audit report is correct, we will complement it with a test of transactions. And therefore, we will take a snapshot of your transactions and we will let it passing through from your system just to make sure that our assessment is correct. When this is done, we believe that we will reach into a positive systems and processes audit report. And when you have this, then obviously you will have a high reduction on the administrative burden from our side, because ultimately we are done with you. We have ensured that your control environment is correct, that the mitigating actions are in place, and that the transactions for Horizon Europe pass through correctly from your system. And therefore, you will have less audits in the future. Now, don't ask me why and how much and up to which extent this audit reduction is going to take place, but this is a logical conclusion that when you have a positive SPA, you will have less administrative burden in the process of your participations, and you will obviously have less controls and audits. You will have, of course, some audits in the future, but they will be more focused. Now, we are going to rely more on your internal control systems, and we are going to speak the same language. We are going to, in other words, we are going to speak the same language with you. We are going to configure our questions in the way that your business is done. We're not going to start you questions about the Horizon Europe, but we were going to start the process about raising questions on how you have set yourself your own business. We haven't done it so far. We have been asking beneficiaries to propose themselves for a test, because we want to see how long does this systems and process audit takes, and we want to see the reaction from your side and what amount of efforts we will need. And I will explain to you on the second slide where we are on this. And the consequence of a positive systems and process audit is obviously that, first of all, it is an investment. It is an investment from your side to allow us access and to let us do the control reviews. But the positive consequence from both sides is that the future audits will be less and the administrative burden will be reduced dramatically. Now, the cross-reliance. The cross-reliance is a fundamental principle which explains the fact that an auditor can rely on the work of a prior auditor. That means that a subject matter has been reviewed in the past. There are elements that they are retained and somebody can have access to. And then a future auditor, after 2 or 3 months, is asking to a set of questions that has been already examined in the past. So let me give you an example. You have a beneficiary who is receiving funds from the cohesion and regional funds. These cohesion and regional funds are subject to different rules, and they are not in the same way as we expense in Horizon Europe. And then you have the same beneficiary participating in Horizon Europe as well. What we are thinking here, and that's what we are aiming, is that if something has been reviewed in the past by somebody else, why to ask the same question twice? Why to bother the beneficiary by repeating the same amount of data requirements and audit questions that somebody else has raised in the past for a different subject matter? If we believe that this information already exists, then what we are bringing for the first time as a conceptual framework yet, because we haven't yet tested, is that we will do our audits in such a way that we will be gathering information from other auditors that they have reviewed the same information as the one which is required for Horizon Europe. This cross-reliance will depend, and its factor of success will depend up to the extent that the conditions are equivalent. Therefore, if the rules are like for like, and if the grant agreements have similarities that they can be very easily comparable and contrastable, then we will enter into this scheme. But if we have rules that they are not the same, if we have rules that they don't speak the same language, if we have rules that they are not identical, then obviously we cannot rely. Therefore, the level of reliance and the level of control lies on the fact that the conditions need to be equivalent or at least very close and very much the same. If they are not, then we cannot ensure cross-reliance. And to do that, we will need additional IT tools, and we will need guidance and assistance from the already established international standards in auditing and accounting. And that's where we are building our knowledge and where we're investing for the future. To make a summary, we have seen that we are now proposing the systems and processes audit on a pilot mode. We have been into all the European Union capitals, and we have run a series of presentations, and we were asking beneficiaries to volunteer. Obviously, we were targeting the very big beneficiaries from the country, so our proposal was targeting to the biggest beneficiaries. And we have a series of big entities that they have proposed themselves voluntarily for an assessment. We were about to do it now in September, October 2020, but because of the COVID, we will not be able to do. And we are postponing this for the foreseeable future when the circumstances will allow ourselves to travel. Because for this kind of pilot tests, you need to be able to be physically present to meet the people and to see the organizations and to express opinion. This we call it pilot because it will be done with respect to the Horizon 2020 requirements. Since we yet do not have financial statements for Horizon Europe, We will be testing ourselves against the requirements of Horizon 2020, and we will be assimilating it by anticipating the future. We have a sufficient amount of beneficiaries that they have been volunteering, and we will be doing it first thing when the circumstances allow back for travel. When we finish this exercise, obviously we will provide feedback to those that they have participated, but also to those that they have expressed an interest or to those that they have raised questions about the systems and processes. And we will be documenting this feedback, and we will be sharing with the European Commission Central Services and with whoever is interested for the future of Horizon Europe. When we are done with this, and in parallel with that, we will launch the Horizon Europe audit campaign, and the audit campaign will reflect the audit strategy. And as we said before, the audit strategy will be targeting into better control and to an earlier detection of risks. Therefore, the audit strategy for Horizon Europe is going to be risk-based audit strategy, focusing on the risks cleverly enough and not doing audits and controls just for the sake of doing them. And by this, we have reached to the end of the presentation. I think there is a series of questions in the Q&As and in the chat, and I'm handing back the floor to Peter.
Thank you very much, Dinos. I think this was a very dense presentation, and fortunately we have a bit of time left to go into a discussion. We all see in the question and answer section that there are already quite a number of interesting questions through which we will go now, but I also encourage you to continue asking questions and to vote on the questions of others in case you are also interested in the subject. So I turn directly to the list of the questions and answers. The first one, I think I can reply to myself. I can reply myself. Will the slides be available after the session? I think yes, absolutely. We have to find just the technical way how to bring them to you. So it will be either by email because you are subscribed to the session so we know who you are, or if the worst comes to the worst, we will publish it on the funding and tenders board. Next question, how will risk flagging be performed for the single beneficiary? Will risk flagging be done for all beneficiaries? And I assume that Stamatis, you want to reply to this one.
Sure. Thank you very much, Peter. Good morning, everybody, from my side also. So there is a question on risk flagging. As we all know, risk assessment is a continuous process. So for each specific audit, but also even before the launch of an audit campaign, the first element that we're taking into account is to analyze this particular risks that we identify in our population. So we analyze continuously the data that we have in order to conclude to which beneficiaries we are going to focus. And following that, once we have the list of beneficiaries, the first step in the audit process itself is to have a risk assessment of this particular beneficiary and see which are the elements of the audit that we would like to focus. So it's a twofold exercise and a continuous exercise that we are doing throughout the audit campaign. Back to you, Peter.
Okay. So next question, will the system and process audits be performed by European Commission auditors or designated auditors at local level? Again for you, Stamatis?
Okay, I'll give it a try, and I think we can combine this question with a number of questions that came later
Okay.
on training to external auditors, because I think these two elements are related. So Dinos very well explained in his presentation that indeed beneficiaries welcomed audits that were conducted, that were taking place by commission auditors, but they had some concerns once these audits were outsourced. Indeed, we heard this complaint, we heard this remark from the beneficiaries. And what we have done is that we have really tightened up the quality control mechanisms that we have internally within the EC, especially for audits that are conducted by outsourced, are conducted by external audit firms. So what we are doing currently is a twofold process. On the one hand, we perform a very robust quality review to each and every audit report that we receive in order to make sure that the quality of the audit report is adequate and it's equivalent to the audits that we perform in-house. And in parallel, we have an extensive training program to the external auditors, in which we regularly communicate common issues that we identify throughout the audit process. We clarify particularities of our H2020 rules in order to make sure that they're up to speed. Now, on the SPAs, our intention is to perform the vast majority of those with in-house staff. Having said that, this will depend on the number of SPAs that the audit campaign for Horizon Europe will have. So we cannot, let's say, exclude a priori that external auditors may be used, but our intention is the vast majority of those to do them in-house. Back to you, Peter.
Yes, I think there is a follow-up question also on the SPAs. Who are the beneficiaries that will be able to ask for an SPA? I think this is, you have a clear answer to this, don't you?
Absolutely. We are looking for large beneficiaries with a number of participations in the framework program. Dinos explained quite detailed, let's say, the elements of the SPA, which is a lot of work, not only from the Commission side, but also from the beneficiary side. So a small beneficiary, an SME, let's say, with only 1 or 2 participations in the framework program, may not be the most appropriate candidate to perform a system and process audit. The effort that they will put into the audit may not be, let's say, relevant, or may not allow them to take out the advantages that they would like to. So we're looking for large beneficiaries with a number of participations in the framework program.
Allow me here a tiny precision that when we went to do the round of capitals and we were giving the presentation for the future, we were clearly explaining to the participants that we are seeking the participation of the very big ones. So for each and every single member state, we were asking the participants to consider themselves, together with a national contact point, who is the biggest, who is the one that has the most recurrent and repetitive participations, who has the controls in place, because this also is targeting to the very big, but also it is subject to a very big investment on the side of the beneficiary. Mm-hmm. So small entities, in my opinion and in our opinion, should not be encouraged to participate. Those that they have the process and the capacity in place, those are the ones that they will be benefit from this exercise. Otherwise, it's going to be counterproductive.
Okay. With the next question, we turn a bit to the discussion about the quality of audits by the external audit firms. So does the Commission have a plan to provide training for external auditors? This will help them better to understand the audit and control and so on and so forth. And I think there is more than one question related to this subject. Who wants to reply, Gaia or Gaia?
You are muted.
You are still muted. Okay, so over to.
Oh, no, it works.
It works. Okay, please. It's
a bit slow. Yes, we are very well aware of the need of additional training to the external audit firms that we will also use under the new program. Because of the volume of operations that we have, it's impossible to carry out all the audits in-house with our own auditors. But we will deeply invest in training and to the new audit firms, absolutely. We are already investing now, but we will invest even more.
Okay, thank you. And then a question that is also of interest to myself. Which will be the main characteristics of the audits in lump sum projects compared to other cost-based projects? Who wants to reply? Gaia.
I take it, yes. So by nature, lump sums cannot be financially audited. So we expect that there will be control, of course, but another type of other types of controls more linked to the technical and more result oriented. The lump sum is decided during the evaluation, and it will remain later on. So there will not be financial audits like we know them for the normal program for lump sums.
Yes, maybe I can even follow up a bit on this, because the lump sum projects are, so to say, very close to what we are doing in my area. indeed, this is one of the main characteristics, and this is one of the reasons why lump sum funding is used. It simplifies all the financial part, so the financial reporting, but also the financial controls, because there will simply not be financial controls. On the other hand, there will still be controls, and these controls will be, of course, on the technical implementation and the technical delivery of the projects. But they will not be so much different from what we do in the other projects in relation to technical reviews, midterm reviews. Also in the cost-based project, we have the possibility to have on-the-spot technical monitoring and technical reviews. So this is the kind of controls you could expect in lump sum projects. Okay, next question. Going back to the system and process audits, by attending a pilot SPA on voluntary basis, will you be released from making a SPA during the first Horizon Europe audit? When will this voluntary SPA happen? On which basis? On H2020 projects or whatever? Who wants to reply?
Okay, I can.
Okay. Yes.
We already covered it in one sense, but I can repeat a few elements. Mm-hmm. So the pilot SPAs will take place on the H2020 legal basis, because this is what we have right now. We don't have Horizon Europe legal basis yet, and we asked for volunteers throughout the community, the research and innovation community, that would be happy to go through this robust control. I would say that one additional element, positive element of SPA is that for the beneficiaries, it's also a consultancy, because there you have very experienced auditors from the European Commission that go on their premises, check their systems, and can provide recommendations on what works well or what needs a bit of improvement. So this is the state of play now. We have been affected indeed by COVID traveling restrictions, but once we are able to go again on the spot, the pilot SPAs are one of those that we're going to perform.
Okay, thank you very much. I think the next question we have already replied. It related to the audits by external audit firms. So I go to the following question. Can you give examples of different programs that could be eligible for the cross-reliance? So how does the cross-reliance work in practice?
If you allow me, Peter, I can
Yes,
say a few comments here. One of the main it's one novelty that has been introduced in the new financial regulation of the European Union, of the European Commission. So the legislator has requested us to try to increase or improve the cross-reliance between audits and assessments. Having said that, this is an ongoing work that the central services of the European Commission are doing and trying to put together different programs in order to improve their cross-reliance on audits and assessments. One obvious, let's say, area that we are really working on are the directly managed programs, in which we have a number of common beneficiaries. So indeed, you have a lot of common beneficiaries between H2020 and LIFE, EMFF, Connecting Europe Facility, these programs. But this does not mean that we exclude the shared management programs, DG Regio, DG Employment programs. So we are trying to extend the spectrum of cross-reliance as much as possible, but this is ongoing work that is managed by the central services of the Commission.
Okay, thank you. Next question on a detail of guidance. Will the list of country-specific issues and the associated guidance for H2020 be transposed to Horizon Europe at the start of the program?
It's food for thought, I think, no? Food for thought, and we take a good note of this.
Let me give you an example of how this materializes in practice, because we perform audits in all the member states and the associated countries. So before we go on to the assignment, we make sure that our own auditors are familiar with the language, first of all, and secondly, with the generally accepted accounting principles and practices. We don't send an Estonian auditor to do an audit in Portugal without knowing Portuguese and without having some real life example in terms of accounting in this country. So we ensure that the people that we send are familiar with the circumstances, they speak the language, and they have experience from the generally accepted accounting principles. This is for ourselves. When we outsource, we have introduced two elements in the tender process. First of all, is experience in this kind of or similar assignments, international experience or experience with assignments that they have been granted by the European Union or the NATO or whoever has been granted funds. And secondly, experience in the language and the field. That means that the auditor who goes there has already been doing assignments of any kind of nature, not only European, into the ground, into the country that the audit is taking place. Now, a list of recurrent and repetitive issues and errors for the countries, it exists. It is internally indeed, and I think it's, as it was said before, a good area for being more transparent in the future, and indeed a good food for thought. But already, please be assured that the audits that are taking place right now are always taking into consideration the language and the local generally accepted accounting principle and practices.
Okay, the next two questions turning into the external audit firms. I think the first one we replied more or less, if what we do in order to increase their performance. But there is also a question on the contracts given to the companies. So will there be new calls for tenders and new companies selected in the future? Gaia, is this for you?
Yes. Already now we are undergoing a tender for H2020, a new tender, and of course there will be one for the new program. Yes.
So the question, the clear reply is yes. There will be a new call for tender and maybe new companies coming in.
Yes. Of course, we cannot anticipate who will be this chosen audit firm.
The next question, it might be the occasion to summarize again what the auditors actually expect when they come on the spot in terms of all the documents that they want to see. I think that is a question that can never be replied exhaustively, but maybe can give the main characteristics of what is expected.
First of all, it's a very good question, which is already replied by the fact that the indicative audit program is public. So whoever is interested on what kind of documentation is necessary and what kind of controls are taking place, we welcome and we encourage the Google search for the indicative audit program. Now, I'm not going to go on details, but as we said before, the major four categories are personnel costs, subcontracting, other direct costs, and the subsequent elements of other direct costs. And for personnel costs, you will never do an audit without reviewing the people. And to review the people, you need to have the contracts in place, you need to have the payroll data, you need to have the information from the systems on the time to the project, you need to have the calculation of the personnel hourly rate, and also the set of productive hours. 5 fundamental elements that you cannot skip in any kind of assignment. So please make sure that you have your contracts in place, your pay slips in place, that you provide access so that we can go into the general ledger trial balance, the hours of the project, and the productive hours. If you have these 5 fundamental elements, you will gain sufficient time and you will ensure that you have the minimum. And for all the other cost categories, please visit the indicative audit program, but please have in mind that you need to have a supporting documentation for every single transaction. And the best and optimal and the most widely used, and the one that we recommend, is the use of the invoice. Because if you have an invoice, it's the hardest evidence that you can provide to the auditor. Please read the indicative audit program or write back to us in the inquiry service if you need more further information on the documentation.
Okay, I have to look at the timing. We are now less than 1 minute away from the end. Therefore, I would now close the question and answer session. There are still a few questions left. We will come back to them possibly in writing. And I hand over the floor to Gaia for a very short final conclusion. Please, Gaia.
Yes, thank you, Peter. I think it was a very thorough presentation. Don't hesitate to send further questions. We couldn't cover them all. I see yet some questions concerning lump sums, some questions concerning SPAs, and some questions about risk and choosing audits, if I can put them in 3 categories. So we will definitely try to answer all this so that you have, but in any case, if you have additional questions, don't hesitate to ask, to write to us. Thank you very much, Peter, and thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. I think we will be cut off in a few seconds. Thank you very much, and also to the audience for the interesting questions. Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.
Have a nice
Bye. Thank you very much.
day. Bye.